On air 24/7. This is today's News Talk TNT.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this live broadcast. We're still now number one here at TNT, today's News Talk, and we're going to bring a special guest onto the line, live and direct from Istanbul, Turkey. We are going to speak to Dr. Frank Romano, who's joining us on the live link right now. Frank, hello, welcome to the program.
Thanks.
And Frank, we want to definitely get an update on the Freedom Flotilla. We've had Medea Benjamin on the program previously, who's also involved in that. And the last time we spoke to her, she was preparing to embark and prepare the whole project, and that was weeks ago. A lot has happened since. There's been delays. You've been blocked. There's been efforts to sideline this important humanitarian mission that you and your team are organizing here. Just give us an update on the project and where it's at right now and what's happened to you.
I will. Just a quick, in a nutshell, what happened was we were all set to go at about 700 activists. Inspections were ready. We've got 5,500 tons of food and medicine ready to bring to Gaza. And but we have to get out of the Port Authority, we have to have a flag from a country. And the flag we have comes from Guinea-Bissau, and Guinea-Bissau pulled the flag. And our evidence is that Israel pressured Guinea-Bissau to do that, and it delayed the whole thing. Well, I've got news to announce now. We have no flag issues, but there's another issue, and that is President Erdogan lost municipal elections. His party did, and one of the arguments that propulsed his opposition to win those municipal elections against Erdogan's party was that he wasn't doing enough to help Gaza. Almost a day after President Erdogan from Turkey decided he's going to cut off almost all commercial relationship with Israel to respond to that. And what happened was he thought by allowing the Freedom Flotilla to sail, that might be taking it a little too far. So now our problem no longer is a flag problem. We're set to go, so we don't have to deal with 2, 3, 4 weeks of procedure there, and inspectors coming from the countries. We're having a problem. I can't really go into detail what that is. And I can't even go into detail about how we got the flag issue resolved, but we're having a problem with the Turkish government now. And about a week and a half ago, United States diplomats from the UK, Germany, and Israel were in Ankara to try to convince President Erdogan to prevent us from sailing, but he did not bite on that. It's just very recently that he has stalled on allowing us to sail.
So that's something that was in the news. Yes, Turkey under a lot of pressure from their own population to be more proactive on this issue. We know there's a big pro-Palestinian support base in Turkey, and a lot of people are concerned that that's not reflected in the actions, the foreign policy of the country. So is that the atmosphere that you're sensing there?
I'll tell the world it is. We've been involved. Most of the activists have left. They've gone to the four corners of the world. We had 42 countries represented here. There are about 10 or 12 activists still here in the trenches. And we have been invited to participate in these demonstrations. And my God, every week and even every day in front of the Israeli consulate, there have been demonstrations. But every week there's one a week, big one that goes from one of the mosques and goes about 3 kilometers. There were 25,000 one, 15,000 in another, and I was asked to speak in both of them. So here I am on top of this van that with all the loudspeakers and the cameras, and I'm to address 25,000 people, and then just last Sunday night, 15,000 people. These folks are in the streets and they are so determined. So you're absolutely right. The president is sort of tiptoeing through the tulips, however, because he's already being sanctioned. for certain activities that he has considered to support some of the groups in Gaza without specifying exactly, and sanctioned by Europe as well. And so he's concerned with that, and their economy is not doing well. And that was also a big reason why he lost the municipal election. So he's really, tiptoeing around here. But one thing for sure is we really are doing all we can to mobilize the people to pressure President Erdogan to let us sail.
And to tell us, Frank, what is the level of awareness among those pro-Palestinian activists in Turkey about the Freedom Flotilla? Has it gotten national press coverage? Are people aware of the project? How can you sort of measure that?
Yeah, I can measure it by not just the masses of people in the streets everywhere, but I also can measure it by spontaneous protest. When Rafah was attacked by the Israeli forces, immediately another group, that's a different group that sets up these major protest marches. That's IHAHA that does that. Another group set up every night a protest movement in front of the Israeli consulate. But not just that. Why do I think the consciousness of the people are very much aware of what's going on? Perhaps as opposed to the United States and Europe, where you folks are doing the best you can to keep people informed, but I still think there's still a lot of work to be done there, is that the press, the Turkish press, gets out and they interview us. It's in the news a lot. So the people, the everyday people in Turkey, I think, are very much aware of this Freedom Flotilla. And especially, now this is what I want to emphasize, the importance of it today. And they're aware of that too, as opposed to perhaps other places in the world, that since Rafah has been attacked, the Rafah gate, which was the only gate systematically open for the trucks to come in with food and medicine and water, is now closed. The Karem Shalom gate has already been closed. And so there's absolutely nothing, by land anyway, nothing coming in by land to help the Gazans, which are officially in famine, according to some sources. So it makes it all that more important to bring as much food, water, and medicine by boat.
And it's important, I think, also to understand the context of what you're attempting to do. Now, there's been other initiatives and efforts before, like airdropping aid into Gaza that was coming via Jordan. And the organizers said, this is not the solution, but this will hopefully just show the ridiculousness of closing the land route, which was active before October 7th. And then by doing that, you can put pressure on the international community to say, look, if this is what we have to do, is this the same sort of psychology behind the Freedom Flotilla, that you're sort of forcing the issue in order to kind of get more international attention more broadly on this? Because a lot of people will look at it and say, well, that's not going to make a difference, and why would you bring it by boat? The Israelis they attacked the last flotilla, but that's not really the motivation. There's a bigger objective behind it. Can you kind of shed light on the thinking there?
Absolutely. Really, the main goal, among other goals, is to shine a light on the plight of the Gazans, of the Palestinian people. And since we've been here, and I've been here over 2 weeks, there's so much, and we have to thank the media, have really come and interviewed us and got the word out to what's really going on. And so really the main goal is to share the story. And because, and I don't know why, but why people tend to be more in tune with things when people are risking their lives, than not. So yes, when we go on the flotilla, when we sail, we will be stopped. We expect to be arrested, and not even in Gazan water. We'll be hijacked by the Israeli Navy in international waters. We'll probably be, and most likely, many of us won't be treated very well. In particular, people like me, I've already have a 10-year ban. The only way I can get back, that's one of the things that interested me about this flotilla, is I've been trying to get back into the West Bank in Gaza, and work with the Palestinians and can. I've been banned for 10 years and I'm still under that 10-year ban. The only way I can get through and get into Palestine is through the flotilla. So we probably won't be welcomed with open arms by the Israeli agents. And then the other people that have Palestinian roots, even though they might have an American passport. And so we're expecting, we've been trained for this, we're expecting to be manhandled. And we see the Israeli soldiers, how they're being trained in the Israeli operations. It'll be a special force. It's called Shekel 13. It's the same force that will hijack this boat that engaged in the massacre at El Shifa Hospital, to give you an idea of what type of people we're going to be dealing with. Well, you know, that's another reason why we're doing it. We're bringing lots of internationals and people, not just that have nothing to do, but people who have a lot to lose are on this boat, but are taking the necessary risks to do that. So that adds credibility to this. And again, not shines a light on us, but on the Gazan people. So you're absolutely right. There's a much more widespread objective of this flotilla.
And also, Frank, if you could just kind of put our listeners into the picture. The last flotilla, Mari Mavina, I think it was 2010. The Israelis killed people on board that boat, and this was a huge international incident, and really stalled diplomatic relations between Turkey and Israel at the time. And they just recently really recovered from that. Just kind of, do you have any knowledge of what happened? How many people
Yes.
were died and injured? Go ahead.
Yes, this is called the Mavi Marmara, and it was in 2010 that the same boat with food, with water, with medication was going to Gaza, and we haven't really emphasized this yet, Patrick, but really we're trying to break the siege, break the blockade to this. That's another ultimate objective, is simply break the blockade. The idea, and then be sort of like a model for other boats aiming to bring the food, but break the blockade. And that's what they were trying to do in 2010 in the Mavi Marmara. So there were the Israeli soldiers, the Israeli task force entered the boat, stopped the boat, hijacked it in the international waters, and 10 Turkish citizens were killed and many others were injured. I think there are maybe about 400 to 500 activists on that boat. And the boat then was taken, as it usually does. And since, I think, 2008, none of the boats have actually landed in Gaza. They take the boat to a port in Israel, and most of the time they inspect the goods and they might allow some of the goods to get through into Gaza. But we'll all be arrested and we'll go to jail, and some of us might stay there longer than we'd like, and will eventually be deported.
Yeah,
and that's what happened to people in the Mari Marmara too. They eventually got deported, and some of them went home in a cask, unfortunately, that had been killed.
Yeah, so just to underline, to everybody watching and listening, that the people who are putting themselves forward for this mission, this humanitarian mission, are undergoing serious risk, personal risk to their physical safety as well. That's aside from, the potential political persecution with the kind of political environment in Washington, Frank. It's bordering on the hysterical, some say the psychotic. How do you think the U.S. government would view yourself and the other American activists taking part in this type of a humanitarian mission?
Well, they've already, again, the United States has sent diplomats to convince President Erdogan in Ankara not to let it go, but they've made comments too. And some of the comments are, we should work, it's like the same thing they're doing. The U.S. government is saying about making Palestine a full member. We can talk about that, a full member of the United Nations. These concepts should be negotiated, something just like a party line, almost bordering on ridiculous. And so getting back to us, we've been characterized as being fanatics, potentially terrorists, and we are subverting the policies of the United States that are trying so hard, in quotes, to work with Israel to open up the gate so that humanitarian aid can come in. I'm not sure what those attempts are. They're withholding some of the bombs now because of the attack on Gaza. But and I will have to confirm what you said, Patrick, about the airdrops. It was just literally, without pun intended, a drop in the dark, and just so little, and it wasn't working very well. And my first, and you might agree with this, my first idea behind all this was, well, the U.S. government is just, feels rather guilty about what's going on and is trying to save, trying to reel in some of those constituents they've lost because they are an accomplice to genocide. So let's make attempts. Let's make it look good. We'll do airdrop. But what really got to me, Patrick, mostly was why the U.S. government have the guts to confront Israel and open up the land gates. That's where the tons and tons of food and medicine are waiting to get in, and can really, really address this famine, this terrible situation. People cannot be medicated, and they're literally cutting off limbs without anesthesia. Women are having, cesarean sections without anesthesia. All these things could be handled if the United States put enough pressure, and they could in one day. They could do it just in a.
No, absolutely, yeah.
My first impression was they're trying to save face. It's really kind of a gutless way to get around things at the expense of thousands of innocent people.
No, and the other thing I wanted to get your opinion on, Frank, you're talking about the United States government needing to save face, needing to change this narrative, because they are, in fact, and have been shown to be not just a party to the genocide that's happening in Gaza, but also a co-belligerent. In fact, none of this would be possible without the full support of the U.S. military, the White House, the entire U.S. government. The House of Representatives rammed through all this funding, and so there's clear that there's absolute, the whole Washington's in lockstep on this operation. But that sending in the World Central Kitchen at that time was, to me, the most bizarre thing, because it's talk about a drop in the bucket. What's involved in procuring large shipments of aid now by working on this project, the staples, the pallets of raw material that people need. They don't need a Michelin star chef to provide, gourmet meals, glorified television dinners, or, chafing dishes full of beans and rice. That's not what they need. They need Rafah open. So what was that? Was that just a PR stunt by the State Department to change the global public opinion on this? What's your assessment of that whole farrago?
I think coming from the United States government, you've got to, and looking at Blinken, and he's saying we're just doing all we can, and we really want to address at such a late date. Before it was like, we've got to help our allies. They have the right to defend themselves. And you have that smirk on his face, Blinken smirk, the same as Netanyahu, this Kubrick type of a smirk, absolutely insensitive to the suffering of innocent people, and very much, as you say, an accomplice to this. And I, as an international lawyer, I'll get back to that. I'm an international lawyer. I represent Palestine before the International Criminal Court. And believe you me, Patrick, I know what it is to be an accomplice in a war crime, and the United States fits the bill perfectly. And so I've added not only Trump, Gantz, and Lieberman to my complaint, which I filed 3 to 4 years ago before the International Criminal Court, also Trump and Obama, and I will add now Biden. But I believe the U.S. government, of course, funding the world, or being involved in the World Kitchen in any way, or at least approving it, was another showcase thing. Knowing full well what the government is doing is wrong. They're an accomplice to these serious war crimes. We can reel in our constituents. We're losing some of our voters, but we're not going to alienate the ones that fund us, which are the Zionist groups in AIPAC, we'll go to the end of the world with these folks because they're keeping us in power. We're keeping us the money flowing, in spite of all, and in consideration with that, we are feeding Israel with a constant supply of ammunition, weapons, and money. They get their funding. I think it's all showcasing, and that didn't oppose APEC or anything. Let's just slip in with a boat here and there, or drop something down. And then if you oppose United States or Israel and what they're doing, well, or you talk about, giving again Palestine, a full status in the United Nations, or you talk about bringing together the idea of a two-state solution. The United States gives you that knee-jerk reaction. Well, it's got to be negotiated. You hear that all the time. This is subject negotiation. Well, let's think about that, Patrick. Negotiate. Who's negotiating? When you negotiate, you normally have to be on an even playing field. You're negotiating. The Palestinians have very little leverage, are negotiating with Israelis, United States. Those negotiations, first of all, are not even being encouraged. Look at the ceasefire deals that fell through the hoops and Hamas has approved. Israel never had any intention of going through with that, of signing it, and was surprised when Hamas did, because Netanyahu again has made a promise to Ben Gvir that he's going to attack Rafah with a deal or not, or he loses the government. Gvir and Smotrich will abandon the government. Netanyahu will lose his mandate and he will lose power. So in order to maintain that power, just like Biden, maintain the power, that money flow from the Zionists, they're willing to place thousands of lives in serious jeopardy and famine and suffering to maintain their money and power, nourished by their greed.
Well, it really sounds like, the Israeli government is locked into a death spiral politically, both at home and internationally. They have no other options but to carry on with probably the worst possible course of action. I mean, Frank, this is an unprecedented situation, for a government, for the Western rules-based international order that puts such a premium on, democracy, human rights, the responsibility to protect. You're familiar with all these doctrines that are often touted by the United States and their allies. And here we have an example that's nobody has seen in the modern era, this type of a siege by a military hyperpower on a basically relatively defenseless, in comparison, native population in Palestine. I mean, first of all, like, how does this compare to any other situation that you know of now or in history?
It's just contemporary war has had spurts of this, where a country has been dominated by another. Like even my era was Vietnam, and when we started to napalm the people in the forest and taking their flesh off with napalm, it was clearly unequal in the bombs that we used, and other conflicts after that. It's just horrendous. But I've been going back and forth from Paris into the West Bank and Israel, doing work since on the cut. And this is what's today is more massively than what the Israelis have been doing with the unbridled support of the U.S. for years and years, actually since 1948. I've seen extra killings. I've seen people, their homes have been destroyed and killed, settlers killing people with the support of the Israeli soldiers. And even though they advocate with the United States as being the bastion of democracy, behind the scenes, it's been like this on a smaller scale since 1948. And so this, you're right, it's giving rise to mayhem today for a supposed democracy supported by the United States is actually contradicting themselves in such a scathing hypocrisy. For instance, it's always been hidden that there really is a two-tier society in Israel. There's the Jews and the non-Jews, pretty much. Well, now Now they're not even hiding it. This is very recent, where laws have privileged Jews over non-Jews, allowing landlords not to rent to non-Jews, and districts only Jewish only. The apartheid state is memorialized in law now, and so the Israelis really, all they can do is blush when you bring it up to them, but it's all memorialized in law and their actions now to what they've been doing for many years.
Yeah, this is an unbelievable situation. It's not just the siege, but the fact that the siege has been allowed to continue now we're in the 7th month, coming on the 8th month. It's pretty unbelievable. In the past, Frank, you've seen the political administrations come and go in Washington over the decades, Republican and Democrat. Previous presidents have intervened to censure, to stop, to get in the way of what Israel wanted to do. Washington has imposed its will on Israel. Ronald Reagan, George Bush Sr., Bill Clinton to some extent during the Oslo negotiations as well. George Bush Jr. Even put Ariel Sharon on notice back in the early 2000s. So there have been situations where the U.S. has intervened, even Operation Cast Lead, Protective Edge. This prompted, scrambled U.S. diplomats to try to put the brakes on those situations, and they did eventually. None of this has happened, Frank, here since October 7th. What has changed in U.S. politics or global politics whereby this has been allowed to carry on unabated for this period of time? Do you have any way of making sense of this?
I think the main reason is, more than ever, our politicians are committed to Israel, and they're literally dependent on funds from AIPAC, the Jewish lobby, and very financially healthy, shall I say, Zionist donors. Biden gets millions, and this is more pronounced today, that many of our politicians are given large sums of money on the condition they support Israel and whatever it does, and don't criticize Israel, and support, obviously, the arms and the money fed in an unbridled way from our government to Israel. And this is their clever thing, and I think this is what's changed a bit. If that politician, that could be Pelosi, all of them are, I think the only one that did not receive funds was Bernie Sanders. But if Trump or Biden did not advocate for Israel 100%, maybe criticize a little bit, it makes them look good, and maybe there's even a deal between Israel and Biden. Hey, go ahead and criticize us. We know it's okay. Support us. It looks good for you. If Biden, Pelosi, and all those politicians, just hundreds of politicians on Congress and Senate, did not advocate for Israel, they give the money to the opponent, which would almost guarantee that they will lose. So this is what I think is new, Patrick, is it's done much more today than it was before. It was still done before. And it's a form of bribery. If this was involving another country, Patrick, it would be scandalous. But since this is Israel, our important quotes, I'm not how important really on the ground they are, but the propaganda, they're the most important ally in the Middle East. We sort of turn away from that. We ignore it. I think that's what's really skewing things more than ever, Patrick. And people are willing to really, sell their soul by allowing these innocent people to be literally massacred. What's happening in Rafah is there's not a war. It's a massacre, but it's also what we call in French, I'll translate it, we're butchering a cadaver. We're going into places that are already leveled, and we're bombing even more with our bombs. And I think that's what's skewing is how our politicians are bound to Israel, and it's all about money, power, and greed again. And this is never ending. And what I can understand is they're not strong leaders, Patrick. The media is doing great to discover it, but our leaders We don't seem to have them anywhere. And I'm a French citizen, so I can say this about France as well. Strong leaders know what the right thing to do is, but they'll weigh before election. Well, the importance of me being elected as opposed to thousands of these poor victims in Gaza. And these victims are not pro-Hamas. Many of these victims in Gaza don't even support Hamas. They're stuck there. But I'm sorry, I've got to get elected. I've got to have those funds, and I will sacrifice that to get elected. It's sort of what they're all doing. We don't have a strong leader stepping up and saying, this is the right thing. I'll risk losing the election, but I'm confident that I will convince my constituents to vote for me, even though I'm not getting the millions or the thousands of dollars from the Israeli lobby and these private Zionists to assure my election victory.
Yeah, it is a dire state of affairs, and I don't think even the great and the good in Washington realize the backlash that they will receive, and that will echo into the next generation. I am absolutely sure, judging by the student protests. What do you make of the student protests in the United States, Frank? They've been attacked by pretty much the entire political class. The media have come down on them. They've been demonized, marginalized. There's calls for them to, they shouldn't be hired. They should be expelled from school, etc. Being attacked by so-called constitutional lawyers like Alan Dershowitz, a former or presently Harvard Law professor. I mean, it's unbelievable, this scene. And then at the same time, they're basically, people are saying, no, it's not. They're not real. They're astroturfed protests. Give us your sort of view, and what your feelings are, your impressions are of the student protests in America.
I think that's interesting. They call them astroturf protests. They're unreal, and it's absolutely the contrary. And now I'm a Vietnam War, my generation, so I was involved in the anti-war movement. But the student mobilization is far more impactful, potentially. Why? Because we're talking about those that, there's a division between Zionist, non-Zionist. There's a division also, it's a class struggle as well, because most of the minorities identify with Palestinians. Most of the people of color do, because they've experienced a lot of this racism, this ethnic cleansing that's going on in Israel with this that the United States is enabling. So it's a class struggle, and it's personal. Why? It's more personal than the Vietnam War, which is people against the military-industrial complex or people supporting the military-industrial complex. Now people are asking universities to do things, to give them an accounting of the investments, to divest, to make those that have been students that have been imprisoned to be released. There are internal things they're asking the university to do, and also to support a ceasefire and literally stop any relationship with whether it be professional exchanges or anything like that with Israel. It's far more of an impactful movement if it doesn't fizzle. Like, the Vietnam War stuff was effective to some degree, but Black Lives Matter and 99 Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street movement kind of fizzled, and there's arguments on both sides, but if the students keep going, and now it's international, there's my alma mater, the Sorbonne, University of Paris, and another one, ULB in Brussels, which is the Free University of Brussels, another alma mater, and then University of California, and a lot of big schools are together. They're starting to make deals with the university in consideration for stopping the encampment. The university is agreeing to divest, like the Evergreen College in Washington, which is Rachel Corrie's alma mater. And then the Brown University has made a deal that we're looking into. We're going to vote on divestment. And other universities like Columbia saying, well, we don't agree on divestment, but we will allow you to be a part of the committees that decide divestment. So they're making deals, or it's simply a violent situation like UCLA and University of Virginia, University of Austin. They've literally forced them off the encampment, and yet this clearly is in violation of their freedom of expression, freedom of association, because it's non-violent protest. And so we're back almost to almost dictatorial type of policies that are manifested by our government.
Yeah, not only that, because they've couched it in this kind of the accusation of that these are anti-Semitic protests, and they're pro-Hamas protest, ergo they're terrorist sympathizers. By doing this smear in the media, and the politicians have piled in on this as well, they tried to delegitimize what you just described, Frank, which is that's their First Amendment right, freedom of speech and assembly. It's very clear. This is protected speech and rights in the Bill of Rights in the First Amendment. So isn't it, how far do you think they can carry this kind of charge, this allegation, by painting everything with, anti-Semitism and terrorist sympathizing and Hamas rallies? You've probably heard it all, Frank. We just got a minute left, but go ahead.
Okay.
Your final thoughts.
I'll bring it all together. Well, one answer to that is there was the anti-Semitism law that the bill passed in Congress and now has gone to the Senate, and it's very broad. In fact, if you equate Israel with racism, you can be in violation of federal law. But it's true. Even Biden voiced it. He said, I kind of agree with Israel that those that criticize Israel and so forth are anti-Semitic. And even resolutions, even the idea that the General Assembly wants to give Palestine the permanent status there is anti-Semitic. When they feel like it's insulting, but it works. The average American is not very cultivated. They're gullible, and it works. So why not continue doing that? But we're not duped. It's phony propaganda. Every time you criticize Israel, you go against what the Israeli authorities are doing and our U.S. government. You're anti-Semitic and you're racist. We've got to, and it's up to us to bring the true story out. And God willing, we will. That this is all propaganda, and they're making us a dupe and giving us the same party line over and over again, and we need to reject it and see what really is happening behind it, and then move forward and making it a better world, and opposing these massacres in our names.
Quickly, what can people do to support the Freedom Flotilla? What do people need to do to help you guys?
Well, doing what you're doing is getting the word out. The importance of it. It's not just about bringing the food, because it is more symbolic. It can't really feed a whole lot of people, 5,500 tons. But, just getting the word out that we're willing to take these high risks, because it's a necessary risk to free them, to break the siege and get into Gaza, and to show that we're willing to take the risk. And there's ways to donate as well. And you can go on the FCC website, and you'll help us out a little bit if people can. Thank you.
Dr. Frank Romano, Freedom Flotilla for Gaza. You guys, you want to find out about this, you can follow their pages, their postings on social media, on X, Twitter. Follow and pay attention to the work of Frank and his colleagues as well. We'll do more reporting on this coming up, so don't worry. We'll keep an eye on this story. Thank you very much, Frank Romano.
Thank you.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Top of the hour news headlines coming up. We got a big hour ahead of us. You don't want to miss this. We're bringing Ryan Dawson onto the program to talk about a lot of these issues and a whole lot more. I'm Patrick Henningsen. Stay with us. We'll see you on the other side.